Yo, what's up, everyone? This is Terry with College Football Stop, bringing you another video today. Obviously, today is October 6th. Can't believe it's that late of a date already. It's kind of crazy. But I wanted to get into week 6 of college football, kind of some of the biggest games this weekend, what to watch for. As always, if you have any questions or you think I'm wrong about something, let me know in the chat. So we'll go ahead and dive into that. Obviously, we have our daily stat dive, which is typically Ohio State oriented. And then we'll get into the Ohio State Maryland game and wrap it up with that. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. So the first game I wanted to talk about this weekend, it's actually a really good weekend of college football. I think that there could be a couple upsets, could be some close games. All throughout the day. I'm loving the way that this weekend's going to play out, or at least the matchups that we have. The first game I wanted to talk about is Alabama at Texas A&M. Okay, now these games, I'm not doing these in order in terms of like what time they're going to be played throughout the day. I just kind of went through and wrote down the games that I thought were interesting and could end up being good games that involved teams that are ranked fairly high. So again, the first one's going to be Alabama at Texas A&M. I think this could be a game just simply because it's at Texas A&M. Alabama's had their issues this year, but I still have Alabama picked to make the playoffs. I'm not going just based off of who's the favorite. Nick Saban didn't make the playoffs last year, lost in the national championship the year before that, and I think that he's due and he's ready to get back in the playoffs and try to make some noise. And I think that they have the athletes to do it. I know their coaching staff is probably not the best, which you usually don't see that with Nick Saban, but I think that they are ready to get back in the playoffs and kind of make some noise. I think that if Georgia has to play them in the SEC championship game, that's going to be an issue for Georgia. So I don't know. We'll see how that plays out. But this weekend, I got Alabama over Texas A&M, and I wrote this down as a final score of 35-20. I think they'll be able to take care of business. I do think Texas A&M's defense will hold its own for most of the game, but I think Alabama pulls away late. All right, and then the next game I wanted to talk about, sticking with the SEC, we have Kentucky at Georgia. Kentucky just last week beat Florida, beat them pretty bad. Kentucky's run game is really good this year, and Georgia, their rush defense is typically one of the best in the country. I don't know that it is this year. I think that when you lose so much on defense, eventually it's going to catch up with you. The same with any team. If you lose so much at one position or on one unit, eventually that's going to catch up to you, and some guys are going to have to get up to speed. I think that's kind of where Georgia's defense is right now. I think that they are a little more susceptible to being run on. However, I don't think that Kentucky's going to be able to get the job done. Kentucky's not really a team that I think has the athletes capable to beat Georgia. I see this being like a 24-14 win. They usually when these two teams play, it is kind of low scoring, and I think that Kentucky's defense will be able to hold their own at least for most of the game. But kind of similar with the Alabama game, I think that Georgia will probably pull away late and take care of business, and they'll probably end up remaining as the number one team in the country, especially because they're playing with Kentucky. Kentucky's undefeated right now. I think they're 5-0. So this will be considered a good win for Georgia, even though like I think that Maryland and Kentucky, if those two teams played right now, I don't know who would win. I think it would be a toss-up. And Maryland's not ranked, Kentucky is, but that's the SEC. We know how that works. Play in the SEC, you're going to get ranked if you go 3-0. All right, and then moving on to probably the game I'm most excited about this weekend outside of the Ohio State game is the Red River Shootout, Texas versus Oklahoma. Typically a banger of a game. Typically two really good teams. Last year, Texas blew Oklahoma out. It was like 49-0. Obviously, they had a new coach with Brent Venables. But Oklahoma does look good this year. I think they're the only team statistically who's in the top 10 on offense and defense. Excuse me. But Oklahoma is a good team this year, and I think that they're not going to come into this game thinking that Texas is that much better than them. Sorry, I heard somebody messing with my door, I thought. But anyway, I think Oklahoma's going to come into this game, and they're going to be ready to play. They're going to be ready to go, and I think that I think Oklahoma's going to win this game. I know that would kind of be an upset. I still think that Texas has a chance to make the college football playoffs, even if they lose this game. Maybe they have to see Oklahoma again in the Big 12 championship. Excuse me. But I'm gonna say the score of this game is gonna be like 30-28. Really close game. Oklahoma wins 30-28. And then the last game I wanted to talk about before we get into some Ohio State versus Maryland stuff is Notre Dame at Louisville. This is Notre Dame's third straight night game. They played two games in a row that were kind of like bangers, where they went down to the last couple minutes of the game. Obviously, Ohio State pulled it off against Notre Dame at home. Then they played at Duke, which that was a tough game, tough environment, and Notre Dame pulled away and got a win. I still think that they're one of like the top, I would say like 6 or 7 teams in college football, even though they're not ranked that way because of the loss to Ohio State. I think Notre Dame goes in and they take care of business, 35-24. I think no upset there. I do think that we will have an upset this weekend. I just think that it's going to come from a team that is not one of these good games. Again, just kind of out of the blue, out of nowhere. Like one that's kind of been on my radar is Georgia Tech versus Miami. I know that Miami's been a really solid team, and honestly they've looked like one of the better teams in college football, probably like a top 4 team if I'm being realistic. But they have to continue winning because they're Miami and they're known for not winning. So I could see a team like that being upset this weekend. Also, Michigan has to go on the road at Minnesota. Uh, I'm not going to predict a Michigan loss just simply because I think they're playing good right now and they're kind of hitting their offensive stride. But Minnesota's a team that can play you tough, especially um, if they can stop Michigan's run game. They could make that into a good game, and Michigan would kind of be stumped. But I don't think they lose that. If I had to pick the biggest chance for an upset this weekend, I would say Georgia Tech over Miami. All right, so I'm gonna move on from the national stuff. Again, I just like to go over some of the games. I love college football myself, all of it, not just like Northern college football or not just Big Ten football or Ohio State. I love college football. I focus on Ohio State because that's the team I love the most. That's the one that's in my heart here. So, all right, moving on to my daily stat dive. This is something that I've been trying to do every day. As I go on, the stats that I'm going to get into will be a little more complex. Right now, I'm just kind of focusing on comparing this 2023 Ohio State team to the past Ohio State teams, and today goes back to 2020. What I have here is where they are so far in terms of rushing yards per game, passing yards per game, and then overall points per game. Or no, overall yards per game. Sorry. Okay. So looking at this year, Ohio State's at 5.1 yards per carry. 22 they were at 5.4. 21 they were at 5.5. 2020 they were actually at only 5.0 yards per carry. Now that's a little surprising when you factor in that Ohio State in 2020 had Justin Fields, and that was actually the lowest one on the list. I think the run game was struggling early. Excuse me. The run game was struggling early. Plus, they only played against Big Ten teams that year, so I guess that year is a little bit of a one-off, considering the fact that the entire schedule was Big Ten games. But I was actually surprised to see that the yards per carry was higher the last 2 years with 22 and 21 than it is this year. So they definitely need to pick that up. Um, they definitely need to get better, obviously. And I think with the offensive line continuing to gel, the run game's been getting better and better every single week. So I think that will happen. I think they'll probably finish around like the 5.4, 5.5, just like they typically do. So I don't necessarily think Ohio State's run game this year is any worse than it was in the past. And then moving on to the pass game, this one is where I do kind of think there was a discrepancy. So looking at 2023, Ohio State's at 8.9 yards per attempt in terms of passing. 2022, they were at 9.5. And then in 2021, they were at 10.0. Obviously, the 22 and 21 years, those are those are CJ Stroud. The numbers are going to look a little different with CJ Stroud because he's a phenomenal quarterback. I mean, 2-time Heisman finalist, and he's in the league trying to break records already in his first 4 games. I think he's on pace to be, as long as he doesn't throw an interception, he's getting close to having the most attempts by a rookie without an interception. So again, he's played phenomenal, and they've won a couple games out there. I think that he's got something good going on. But enough of that. 2020 in passing yards per attempt was 9.0. So right now they're a little bit worse than 2020, but again, that was an all Big Ten schedule, and we've only played 2 Power 5 teams so far this year. So obviously that's going to be a little different. But it's still, they're just a little bit less than 2020, but quite a bit less than the last 2 years, which I think that if you're an Ohio State fan, you know that the offense has not looked as good, as explosive as it has the last few years. I think that's the biggest reason why is just simply the um, getting the ball down the field and, getting completions on those balls when you get them down the field. Obviously, we've talked about that ad nauseum that Kyle McCord needs to get better at those types of throws. And I think that he will as the year goes on. And then the last thing, as far as our stat dive, Ohio State yards per game, 2023, we're at 448, 2022, 491, 2021, 561, and 2020, 519 yards per game. So this is actually quite a big discrepancy also, because again, you're kind of way down on what you used to be in terms of yards per game. Now, some of this has to do with the clock rules. Some of this has to do with the teams that Ohio State has played so far. They've been kind of focused on shortening the game, letting the clock run down before they snap the ball. So those overall stats, they really could be impacted by that. That's why I usually try to stick to like per attempt or per carry stats, just because they don't really mean anything, I guess, as long as you win the game. And we already discussed on a previous episode that Ohio State's defense kind of has made it to where the point differential this year is the highest that it's been since 2019. But they still have the meat of their schedule left, so that could obviously change if a couple teams put some points up on them. All right, so moving on. Again, my overall takeaway from that stat dive is just that Ohio State's offense is not as good as it was in the past. And I think that it will get better. I think it'll get closer, but I don't. I just simply think that this offense is not going to be as good as offenses of the past. Especially if I'm looking back at this, I never really realized, but the Ohio State's 2021 offense was kind of insane. That looking at this list in the last 4 years, that offense had the most yards per carry and the most yards per attempt passing and the most total yards per game. 561 yards per game is crazy, but when you look back at that, you had C.J. Stroud, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith-Njigba. I mean, look at the offensive line. I can't name them right off the top of my head, but I know that probably almost all of them are in the NFL playing right now. And I mean, the defense was not great that year, so they had to put up points. So I don't know. That offense was crazy, but that's to be expected with a team with guys like that. So we'll go ahead and move on here. What I wanted to get into next is a little bit of Maryland stuff. I said yesterday I was going to kind of dive into the Ohio State versus Maryland game. Basically, I just have some players to watch for on Maryland's team, guys that could possibly get off on Ohio State and cause some issues. So first, I wanted to start with the running backs. I'm going to skip over to Aaliyah because he's the quarterback. We know what to expect. We played against him before, so we probably played against these guys before, but I'm guessing that you don't know their names, and I didn't either before I went in and started looking up this information. So their main running back, his name is Roman Hemby. He's got 64 carries, averaging 4.8 yards per carry. 4.8 is not bad. It's fine. That's keeping them on track. Now they have another running back who doesn't have as many carries, but I'm wondering kind of what the situation is with this guy. I didn't really get to look up and see what was going on. But his name is Kobe McDonald, and he has 26 carries, but he's averaging 7.8 yards per carry. So that may be a guy to look out for. Maybe that's a back that they use to relieve Hemby. I don't know, but if that kid gets the ball, he's going for almost 8 yards to carry. Ohio State's defense is going to really need to pay attention to him and make sure that he's not getting loose on them. When looking at Maryland's receivers, it looks like they got 6 players. This is a mixture of receivers, tight ends, and running backs. But 6 players that have over 10 catches and over 100 yards, and 5 of those guys at least have a touchdown. That's something that, that just tells you they spread the ball around. They're getting the ball out to multiple people. So basically, every single defender on the field needs to be ready to cover their guy and for the ball to come their way. Because if they don't, they're going to get beat. And it seems like they have a lot of guys who are ready to go. So that also is going to allow them to keep their players fresh. So Ohio State needs to keep that in mind. If you got somebody starting to slow down a step or whatnot, again, it's just something that Ohio State really needs to focus on is stopping the pass, and everyone needs to be on their A game in terms of pass coverage. Looking at Maryland's defense, a couple things I noticed. They have a guy, DB on their team named Tareeb Hill, that has 3 interceptions so far this year. I mean, that's not a ton, but you're looking at like a little bit less than one a game. Um, Very likely that that guy is a ball hawk and he's ready to make some plays if the ball is thrown his way. So that's something that Ohio State needs to keep in mind when they are throwing the ball. Now, even if this guy has 3 interceptions, I don't really know if he's going to be the caliber of player that's going to be able to cover Ohio State's receivers. So we'll see. That's just a name that I wanted to throw out there to keep an eye on. And then the last thing in terms of Notre Dame's defense is they have 13 sacks so far on the year. So they're averaging over 2 sacks a game. Ohio State has 5. They're averaging barely 1 sack a game. So keep an eye on that. Maryland's defensive front against Ohio State's offensive line. And I did notice that a couple of the guys that have sacks on their team, that have multiple sacks, I mean, a couple of the guys that have multiple sacks on Maryland's team are a DB and also a linebacker. So it tells me that Maryland's going to be blitzing. Kyle needs to be on his A game and kind of, if someone blitzes, replace the ball or replace the blitz with the ball. And if they do that, I think that Ohio State's going to get off and get some big plays on Maryland. And I don't think they want that to happen because if that happens, I think Maryland's going to be in trouble. But we'll get into that here in a minute when I get into my score prediction. All right, and then the next segment I'll have here is expected takeaways. So this is basically me kind of predicting what Ohio State fans, myself included, are going to be feeling after the Maryland game. And what am I expecting us to come away from this game and be like, oh, blah, give our statement. So for me, I think that Ohio State's offense is going to click in this game. And I think that we're going to come away from this game saying that Ohio State is a national championship contender. Ohio State is going to be in the conversation to win the Big Ten in the national championship. I know obviously we have big games with Penn State and Michigan, but basically what I'm saying here is I think the secondary is the truth, and I think they're going to prove that this weekend against a really good passing game from Maryland. And I think that the offense is going to start to click. Kyle McCord, with the confidence that he gained from the ending of that Notre Dame game, I think is going to start taking a little bit more risk, putting balls or making a little more anticipation throws. And I think that's going to show, and you're going to really see this offense get off this weekend. So that's what I think the takeaways will be. Ohio State is amongst the best teams in the country. Their offense and their defense are legit, and teams better watch out. And then my final thoughts here, and then I'm going to give my score prediction. So I know that what I just said was similar to like a final thoughts, but basically just kind of recapping the Maryland game, what I think we need to see this weekend. I want to see Ohio State not abandon the run game. I don't care if that's how we end up winning the game. I don't care if Kyle McCord doesn't throw for, 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Ohio State has abandoned the run game so much in the past that it's costed them games, in my opinion. And I think they need to stick with that. Excuse me. I think they need to stick with that. And I think that if they stick with the run game, that's going to allow TreVeyon Henderson and Chip Trayanum, and also a little bit of news. Ryan Day said this week that he's expecting Miyan Williams to be back and ready to go this week. I guess it came out that Miyan Williams kind of had some weight issues and was in a little trouble with Tony Alford because everybody has a specific weight they have to be at. I guess he got above that, which is why we haven't seen Miyan Williams for so long. I don't know if that's true, but that's what was released by some of the other guys that have inside information. But Ryan Day said that Miyan Williams should be back and ready to go this week. So I think that's exciting. I think that Miyan Williams being at the proper weight and ready to go, all that does is make Ohio State's run game better. I know everyone likes Chip Trayanum and TreVeyon Henderson, and so do I. But Mayan Williams is that back that can really wear a defense down. Maybe Chip Trainum is that too, but what I've seen from him, he has the size, but the way that Mayan Williams runs, he runs angry, and he's running like he's trying to hurt you, like you stole his baby or something. I don't know how you want to put it, but Mayan Williams runs angry, and I want to see him back out there because that just expands what this team is able to do. And Mayan Williams is a good answer in short yardage. Obviously, so is Chip Trainum. So I want to see all three of them guys out there, and it's just good to hear that Mayan's back. You know, he's kind of a program guy, and I think that he's one of the players that is kind of a backbone at Ohio State. Maybe he's not. I don't know what's going on inside the locker room, but again, I like Mayan. I'm ready to see him out there. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I think the score of this game is going to get kind of lopsided because Ohio State's defense is going to be too good for Maryland to score a lot of points. I say this game is going to be something like a 48-17. Ohio State's not going to score 50 or 60 points. I don't think they will this year at all because they just don't have the offense to do that. Even that 48 maybe need like a defensive score or like a takeaway that gets the offense into really good field position for them to get an easy score. But 48-17 is my final score prediction. I'm excited for this weekend. Let me know what you think about the video. Obviously, leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Come back for more content Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. I'll be live every single day. Peace out. You guys have a good day.